It's a little closer.
All right, Mike Clelland, welcome back to Grimerica after almost 8 years. How you
Hey,
doing?
great. How are you all?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. What fascinating times since we've chatted last. I mean, how much has happened in the whole. I mean, everything from UFOs and Skinwalker, and I mean, I feel like your book was kind of your sort of prominence, your rise to prominence in your books and all. We're at the sort of the cusp at the beginning of all this, really.
You
Well,
know,
I don't
it's
even remember the books. Wasn't there a podcast too?
Oh
oh, I
yeah,
had a podcast. Yep, I had a
Yeah, I
podcast in
remember
the
listening to
late.
all of those.
Yeah, those are still on. Like, and those are available. The Hidden Experience was the podcast I did between 2009 and 2000 and actually 2014, 15. I kind of dialed it down. And what happened is once I started writing the book, I just all my energy was just one. I couldn't do two things. I was going to one thing only. I was going to put all my energy into the book, and that's what I did. And so I haven't really even been that active. The blog was really a big part of my life for all those years, and then that kind of died down when I started writing the books. So
Yeah, I was definitely a fan of the podcast. So I remember it was actually as soon as I heard your voice when you jumped in the studio, it was just like, oh yeah, man. I remember like driving around in my truck listening to all those
oh, great on.
experiences back in the day. Yeah.
So there's I popped those are on. I got they're like on the my whatever little podcast thing. They show up, and so like they're like I'll listen to some of those ones, and like some of them are great. That old podcast was like I was in the throes of trying to deal with my own set of experiences and such, and you, another part of the reason I stopped doing the podcast is like that was my therapy. That was like that was me being able to talk to people about exactly these experiences, and I found that I needed it less after a certain point. I was like, you can hear it in my voice in some of those shows. I was really needy as far as like I was like searching
yeah.
for my own self. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just listened to your some of your excerpts from your new book. You put that in your podcast feed. I mean, I think you're
Oh,
doing
I still put things in it, and
you're
honestly,
great. You're doing a
I'm
great
using
job
it to
narrating.
promote. Yeah, I use it to promote the books and stuff a little bit more
Yeah,
than any kind of news source,
yeah.
which is fine, I guess. Yeah.
Well, you're doing a good job narrating your book, though. I mean, it sounds really good.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It's
Yeah,
funny because I got to be really careful because I mean, it's totally solitary thing. You just sit. And I actually go into a closet. I'm in the closet, and I've got these curtains and stuff, so it's got great sound. And then I just sit there alone, and I could just get closer to the mic and just whisper. And I have to really be careful not to, like. I mean, the content is the fiction book is kind of it's meant to be kind of dramatic and mysterious, and I don't want to like cheat by like whispering the whole book. So I got to be super careful.
What was it like writing a fiction?
I think the hardest thing in my life I've ever done.
Wow.
It was a huge depart. So the books, the research for the owl books were, like I was getting a lot of mail. People were contacting me, and oftentimes the mail was great. So I had a total starting point, right? I had a document I could quote from, and I could kind of ponder the questions within the document. I could get back to the person. I could ask some questions. I could marry it to another story that was similar. So I had like a wealth of starting material. Boy, with a fiction book, like wow, the blank page is blank when you start that off. So it was really tough to stay. It's wow, it was tough.
Did you seem?
Did you have it in your head of it? Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Graham.
Well, I mean, it seemed like you have a knack for it. I mean, I didn't get a chance to read the whole book, but I started and listened to your excerpts, and I mean, I feel like you're like hitting it right on the nail there. Like you really seem like you're an experienced fiction writer. I was
well,
drawn
I'm an
right in.
experienced fiction reader, so I had that going for me. So yeah, so I'd read a lot of books, and it was funny because it was I mean, the main character is me in a lot of ways. It's real. I mean, there's some stuff there that's like, oh, that's me talking. There's some things where the main character talks about like creativity and insecurities and art and stuff like that, and that was totally me. But I bet you I spent a year is not right. Less than a year, but close to a year. I bet I spent close to a year going through the book and reading it, rereading it, and just shortening it down and shortening it down. And if a sentence was long, I would just figure out a way to make it short. And if there was like a thought that wasn't fully thought out, like oh my God, I probably spent close to a year just scrubbing, taking out words, taking it. So I worked really hard to get it to feel like and it's pretty fast paced, the story, to get it to feel like I didn't want to. Some friends of mine read it, and few people I really respect who said like, "Oh, this is a real book. You need to take this seriously."
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to work hard to get it to feel like a real book, because you can't let. I mean, you like, oh, there's like one bad sentence in a book like that would stand out. If one sentence was unclear or something like that. So I had to really be diligent.
When will it be on audio?
Oh, you're asking the hardest. I'm trying to read it, and it's going really slow.
Yeah,
like I'm terrible
yeah.
at reading aloud, and I'm great at audio editing, but I'm terrible at reading aloud. So I feel like I'm reading. This is not quite true, but almost true. Where I feel like I'm reading every sentence 5 times, and then picking the best sentence, and then, it's a lot of work. But I think it'll turn out really well. And when I was writing it, I wanted it. I was kind of picturing my own voice speaking it.
Good, yeah. What were you going to ask, Darren?
Oh, I forget now. Like, did you have the story in you? I think did you always have it? Like, how long? Like the fiction thing, where did that come from? Like, did you just start with the blank page, or did you just did you have a story in your head that you wanted to get out? Has it been dying to get out? Because I mean, fiction to me is just insanely overwhelming. I'm a huge fiction fan as well. I love fiction, but to try and write it seems fucking nuts.
Yeah, it was. So there's a line. Jim Mars said it, because writing fiction is hard because fiction needs to make sense, right? So I could just write the owl stories, and some of these owl stories are very, very ethereal, and they just seem so dreamlike, and they don't really have a beginning, middle, and end. And I love those kind of stories. Those kind of difficult to understand experiences that people have. So that was a lot of, and I didn't have to, at the end, I was like, I don't know what the owls mean. Like, I could say that at the end of a nonfiction book. Like, I have not come to a conclusion as an author, like what these mean. But for fiction, it kind of had to be buttoned up. What happened is, so I was a professional illustrator. I hardly do any illustration work. I haven't done hardly any in the last decade, but that was my job for all my years. I lived in New York City and worked for ad agencies, and I worked for magazines and did book illustrations. But I wanted to do it as a graphic novel. So the story itself, the cover of the book, the cover of the book, is got like a kind of comic booky kind of feel to it. So, there it is. And I did that on purpose. It's kind of, if you really look at it, it's got a comic book vibe to it. And I did that on purpose because it was going to be a comic book. And I did a handful of sketches this is going back over a decade, in 2010. Not sure if it was 2010 or 11. It might have been 2010. It was definitely 2011 I was working on it. And I wrote a treatment, it was probably 8 or 9 pages, but it was kind of a good, clean outline of the story that I had. And I started drawing it. And I started doing some preliminary sketches of how I wanted the color schemes to look and how I wanted the lettering to look. And it went so slow. And as soon as I finished the page, it's like, oh, I know how I want to change it. And then I would go back in and change it. I was just and do you know Christopher Knowles? He runs The Secret Sun.
Yeah.
I contacted him, and he had worked a lot in the comic book industry. And I said, I'm thinking of this novel. And he interrupted me like, oh, no, man, don't do it. Don't you dare. Like, you'll drive yourself crazy. It's the amount of work is so huge. Doing a comic book all by yourself would be creative suicide, because you would just get, and it really was. So I put it away. And then after I finished, I wrote a bunch of these other books. So it was around 2019. I kind of was like, I found the treatment. And then I think it was the summer of 2019. I tried picking it up and writing it as a fiction book. And it got nowhere. It went nowhere. It was so frustrating. And then I kind of put it away and would pull it out and put it away and pull it out. And so I worked on it. This was the book is kind of a quarantine project. So I put a lot of work into it over the pandemic, and then and it got published in May of this year. But it was boiling away in there for 13 years.
Right, right. So we might as well get into a bit of the stay on that book for a bit. What's the premise of it, and can you give us a little bit of, or how would you sell the book? I guess.
Oh, this is tough. So it's I've done a lot of owl research. So I'm known as the owl guy, and for the last like 18 years or something like that, it was 2009. What is that? That's not quite 18. 2009, that's 14 years, about 14, 15 years. I've been, if anyone anywhere in the world has an experience with a UFO and an owl, and then they type in Google search UFO owl, I come up. And then right at the top of my blog and right at the top of my website, and if I talk on a podcast, I always mention it. If I want to hear your stories, it says I want to hear your owl stories, right at the top of my page there. And so I've been getting these stories, but a lot of them, like multiple stories a day. Good, and I'm not like this is very narrow. It's just the owl and UFO stuff. And over the years, what has happened is, and I cannot tell you how many times I've written out the words flavor and mood, because people will say, they'll tell me a story, and they'll say, I haven't heard this story exactly, but I've heard many with the same flavor and mood. So I tried to use some of my own experiences and some of the experiences I've collected and some of the stories I've heard, and imbue the story with that flavor and mood. Now, it's definitely a story about UFO contact, but I never use the word UFO in it. There's only a couple points. There's only one point when someone sees something in the sky. And then there's just a lot of that implication. So what happens is, again, I'm not looking at the big grand totality of the UFO mystery. I'm looking at this thin little sliver of people who have UFOs and owls co-joined. And sometimes it's not even UFOs. It's just owl stuff. Owls in death, and owls in meditation, and owls in psychedelic, most particular mushrooms. People have owl experiences. And they seem to have that same flavor and mood. It's a really powerful thing. So I've been trying to put that into the story, that feel, that kind of mood, and I at the same time I tried not to make it a typical UFO narrative, and it feels much the way I describe it is a combination of Twilight Zone, Twin Peaks, and X-Files. So the premise is there's an artist who's 1,000% based on me, who has sort of a crisis of faith, and just walks off into the desert. It's a little mysterious why he does it. We find out later in the story why he did it, but it's a little unknown. And he has a kind of mystical walkabout, like his journey into the self. And there's a lot of internal dialogue in that part of the story. And then he turns his back on one life, and he arrives at a little town. And some folks that read the book initially, before I had, they read it and gave me some feedback before it went into publication. One of them, do you know Joshua Cutchin? Yeah. So Joshua read it, and he got back to me and said, I didn't know where this book was going when the guy's out and just walking around the desert. Like I wasn't sure whether he was going to get anywhere. So so it's on the back of the book. It says it, he arrives in a town. And so it's pretty early on in the story. He's about, it's like less than a quarter of the book that he's out alone in the desert. But he arrives in this little town, and then there's like a collective mystery that's at the town. Like, why was he drawn to this town? Why are other people drawn to the town? What is this mysterious little town? Who are these people? And that becomes a sort of mystery. Some of them are spies. He meets old friends that he hasn't seen in a long time. So it's got this kind of Twin Peaks quality to it. So what's been happening is the people with the owl and UFO experience, that thin thread in the overall subject, they're people telling of contact experiences. Like the pop culture thing about UFO contact would be, I got taken out of my bedroom, and I got taken on board a craft, and I was put on a table, and there's creepy medical exams, and that's the story that pop culture tells us is out there. I'm not hearing that. Like, I guess I've heard it a little bit over the years, essentially pretty much close to zero. what I'm hearing is people telling of these like really powerful coincidences and these really mystical events, and then like a huge life changes in their life where they'll be going down one track, and a powerful synchronicity will happen, often involving an owl, and then their life will just take a hard turn, and their life will be completely changed and different. Those are the stories I'm hearing. So I wanted to tell that story. And at the same time, let me tell you, it is like, if you have, I mean, it feels like a comic book in a lot of the way. It's kind of big in its themes, and I gave myself permission to really go for it as far as plot twists and the setting and the sparseness of it. So
The owl reports, are they like, so is it generally, because I'm an Indian, and in a lot of Indian cultures, those owls are bad luck. If you see an owl, especially associated with death, or, if you see an owl, a lot of times it means a loved one might die, or someone you know is going to die. If you see, sometimes it's 3 owls. If you see 3 owls in a row, but it always seems to have some sort of connotation with bad luck and death. So I'm wondering, these reports that you're getting, are they following that vein, or is there a positive aspect to
it's
some of them?
it's interesting because that's the lore, and that's not the lore everywhere. Like in like Scandinavia and such, like the shamanism practices there and the folklore there, the owl is much less sinister than it is especially in the Native Americans in North America, and especially the Southwest. Wow, really, really dark lore there. That lore is in there. I'm getting the vast amount of the stories are surprisingly optimistic and powerful and tell of life changes. And so that I'm cautiously saying, because again, I'm like, people are coming to me and they're finding me through UFO type stuff. It's funny because I have been saying, which is true, that the majority of the owls and death stories that I get, I've gotten some that are, someone will see an owl and then they will find out a loved one died. That is a very small percentage of the owls and death type stories that I'm collecting. What is a much bigger and more powerful, and I have my own experience, I'm happy to tell it, but is people will see an owl after a loved one died, most often a parent. And then by seeing the owl, so a guy sends me a letter, and he says, my dad died of a heart attack. And I was at the hospital, and I left the hospital, and the doors opened up, the automatic doors, and it's nighttime, and I walk out onto the sidewalk. It's late at night, and no one's there. And the sidewalk has got grass and on the side of the sidewalk is a little owl. And he walks up to the owl, and he says, "Dad, I love you. Thank you for being such a great father. It was an honor to have you as my father, and thank you for visiting me now." No one had to tell him. No one. That's not in our folklore as Westerners. But I have that story a lot, where people will see an owl shortly after a parent, most often a parent died, and they will talk to it as if it's their deceased parent. And with that, the grieving either lessens or evaporates completely. It's very consistent. That said, I have heard, in fact, it's funny, just a few days ago, I got a letter, and one guy counted off 6 really powerful stories where saw an owl same day my wife's father died, saw an owl the same day my sister died, saw an owl, 3 days later my aunt died. And he had 6 examples of that. And then he contacted me because this summer, I got to be careful, I don't want to give anything away. He saw 3 owls on a bridge, and he said it shook him up so much. He said he was shaking. He was so emotionally impacted by that. And he basically asked me, "What does it mean?" And I can't answer what it means, but there was no associated death with that, the 3 owls on the bridge. And that was over the summer. So it's been 6 months or so.
Hopefully that was just the end of it.
That's exactly what I speculated, but I certainly can't know. Yeah.
So Is that in the book? I guess. I mean, it seems like it'd make a good movie. We should make a little movie out of it.
Of what, the fiction
The
book?
novel, the novel.
Yeah, yeah, the
Oh
novel.
man, I say it when people talk to me. I'll talk about the book, and then I'll just say, "Oh, and in the movie, this and this and this." I totally pictured it in my head as a movie. Totally pictured it in my head. I put a blog post up with music. There's music that I'm like, this music is gonna. I didn't say it in the blog post, but there's some songs like this song is playing in this scene, and yeah, I was very. Ooh, I was very. I totally saw it 100% as a movie in my mind.
What's your take on owls? If you see one, do you see a lot of owls?
See them all the time. See them all the time. Now, I granted, I'm in a place with a lot of owls. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, right outside of Seattle. I live in across in the islands here, and there's a lot of owls here. So I hear them. I hear them almost every night, just out my window, all night long, every night, pretty much every night. And
That's gotta freak you out a little bit, no? When you're
not at
doing
all.
like,
No, I'm
not
over it.
even when you were doing like the. What about like back in the beginning when you're doing the hidden experience thing and getting the creepy stories all the time, and then you're going to sleep and all these owls are fucking hooting out your window?
Yeah. Well, yeah. That was it was. I've calmed down a lot since then. You know, it's. I've I burned up a lot of energy and a lot of tension and a lot of there was a lot of there was a rough chapter of my life, and that's the chapter I was doing the podcast when I said, that was my therapy. I think I just got tired of I had a powerful event in 2013 that alleviated that anxious chapter of my life. And I know people who are going through that same kind of flood of synchronicities, and it can be crazy making. And so I'm at a point now where I and this is like a decree. This is like something I really had to force myself to do, where I no longer allow myself to be astonished by the synchronicities or the paranormal type stuff that sometimes shows up in my life. I can be in awe, but I can't be astonished. Astonished to me almost like being frightened. It's your adrenaline. It's I can't let myself do that, and so I can still be in awe of the power and the mystery of it, but I can't let it bring me down or I can't turn into the person I was between 2006 and 2013, where I was pretty shaky those years.
Funny, it's kind of answering my question I was going to ask you. Is I guess the title of the book is The Unseen, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Unseen. And my question was going to be, how has your view of the unseen kind of changed over the last 10 years, over the last 8 years? It seems like I'll leave it at that.
Well, the first book, the first owl book, The Messengers, was kind of a conglomeration of, like, I just had this wealth of stories from the blog, from my own experiences, from people reaching out to me. And as I was working on the book, I was getting, like, I would get to a chapter and they'd be like, I just need like just the right story. Like this, like, like some chapter, one chapter would be called Owls and Death, and one would be called Owls and Shamanism, and one would be called Owls and Mythology, And so I just like, I just need the right story to make this chapter coalesce. And I would go to bed and I'd get up in the morning and then I'd open my email inbox and the perfect story would have arrived. That happened so many times that I just, like, I was like, whoa, there's like magic taking place in the process of writing this book. So I feel like my ideas about the whole subject were pretty well cemented in place during the writing process of that first book, which is about depending where you start and finish, it was about a 2 or 3 year process to write that book. And it's changed, there's little nuances of things that have come out a little more since then. But I feel like I'm kind of like, I feel like I have a good handle on the mystery. What it may mean, I can't answer. In the second book, I listed off 4 reasons of what owls might mean. And even those are kind of vague and wishy-washy. So I could happily read that little bit if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let me just, if I got it here. I had the books on my desk here. Just Let me get
If
here.
I
We go.
remember correctly, that was like a big part of the podcast. Think that was like I was always into the synchronicity stuff.
And that's what I'm hearing from people. People don't talk about being on a table or being. No, almost nobody even talks about UFOs. Nobody says, "Oh, I saw a UFO." Like I never hear that. I mean, I certainly do, but that's not. They talk about incredible synchronicities and so that like I'm not really just interested in the synchronicity. I want to know how that impacted your life. I want to know what was
Yeah.
going on in your life leading up to the synchronicity. I want to know what changed after. It's the same with a powerful owl sighting, and it's the same with a UFO sighting. I want to know what
Do you
was
rate
the
them?
pardon.
Do you have them like so? You must have just a collection of all these synchronicities. Do you like rate them? You know,
I
these
try
are
not
like-
to. I try
No.
not to rate them. A little, it's funny because it's like someone tells you a story, and it's like how someone tells you a dream, and they're like, "Oh my god, I had the most incredible dream," and they tell you the dream, and I was like, it's not
I'm
that great of a
already
dream.
glazing over. Yeah, as soon as I hear like, got to tell you about my dream, it's already glazing over.
Yeah, well, I don't glaze over, but what it is I can tell what I'm trying to tap into, not so much as how the story affects me, but how it affected them. Somebody will say like, this one woman said I was working at a job and she was also working there, and everyone at the job went to a restaurant, and I said like, oh, I'm working like you're writing stuff on owls. I'm like, yeah. She said, and she overheard that, and she said, oh, I had an experience with owls that changed my life. And I'm like, okay, let's hear it. And she said, I saw 3 owls. And I'm like, how did it change your life? And she said, oh, it just changed my life. And I'm like, she had no idea who I was. And I'm like, you got to give me a little something. And then she said, I said, when did it happen? And she said, August 22nd. And I went, August 22nd is my birthday. So I don't, and then she never got back to me, and I don't know what happened. So I thought that was very funny that.
I hope
So
she
here,
didn't die.
pardon?
I hope she didn't die from the owl.
She's not. She's a Facebook friend, and I see her
Okay,
pictures all the
good.
time. So
Okay. Let's see this question on the screen from Jade Birchie. Or not a question, but more his story because it's kind of creepy. I'm in the desert, and a friend and I saw a coyote or a dog or a cat jump into the center of the road in front of us, illuminated by the headlights. It shape shifted into an owl and flew off. We both.
whoa. Tell him to get a hold of me. I want to hear that story more thoroughly. Yeah.
All right, Jay Birchie, you heard it. You heard the man. Get a hold of him. Let him know the story. Have you heard of shape-shifting owls or anything like that? I mean, the coyote to me is interesting because the coyote is also a very powerful actor in a lot of Native American folklore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's in a very different kind of, depending whether, I guess every tribe and culture has its own set of mythologies, folklore and mythologies and such. So, but I've heard some sort of shape-shifting stories. I've heard owls shape-shifting into people, or I've heard owls with human faces. I've certainly heard that. So, but never exactly that. Here's how I'm doing it. I've heard that, though I have never heard that story exactly. I've heard many stories with that same sort of flavor and mood. Like that story has a mood to it. It's only a sentence long, but that's got a mood to it. So, that's what I'm interested in, is that, why are people being confronted with these dream-like events?
And then the owl is like a powerful symbol in the Illuminati. Like, I don't know. You don't even have to believe in the Illuminati, but it seems to be like, that's the symbol. Is that right, Graham? Am I getting
Bohemian
that right?
Grove, yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting to know now. Bohemian Grove, I did a little bit of research on this and trying to use the internet to research Bohemian Grove is crazy. There's a lot of stuff I don't think is true that's online, doesn't make it true. But so inside there's a club, there's a Bohemian Grove, which is a compound north of San Francisco. And in San Francisco proper, there's kind of a gentleman's club, a business club called the Bohemian Club. And it has an owl as its symbol. And when you go into the club, and there's like, they have a website and everything, so you can, excuse me, you can go in and, there's pictures of inside, and there's images of the goddess Athena everywhere. So the goddess Athena is present in sculptures and in little quotes. And there's the line above the door says, "Weaving spiders come not here," and that's traces back to the myth of Arachnia, which is Arachnia was a woman who was a weaver, and she challenged Athena, who's not only the goddess of wisdom but the goddess of like arts and crafts. They had a competition to who would make a more beautiful tapestry, and Arachnia made this tapestry, and woven into the tapestry were all these kind of like wry, sardonic, playful images, kind of embarrassing type images of the gods and goddesses. And Athena was so angry that she turned Arachnia into a spider, and that's where we get the term arachnid for spiders. And so, and then weaving spiders come not here is and also like a catchphrase for don't bring your day job into the club. So it's got sort of a double meaning, but there's all kinds of images of Athena, and Athena had a companion owl. She's often pictured with an owl, a little owl. It's not very big. It's only like a little owl on her wrist most often, but that is her symbol, is the owl. And so, like, I think that the owl is the symbol of the Bohemian Club more because it's associated with Athena, the goddess Athena, and that great big giant owl, stone owl. I think there was a natural stone there in the Bohemian Club that's kind of on the water, and they do kind of performances in front of it, whether they're rituals or whether they're just kind of drunken revelry. I'm not sure because I've never been there, but I've certainly heard both sides. And that's my understanding that is a stone structure that has been had some cement added to it, so it looks like an owl.
Is the big effigy they burn at the Bohemian Grove? Is that the thing that they say is an owl, but it's not? Maybe
they don't burn the effigy. They burn. There's like it's a great big. It's like a size of a 4-story building behind this kind of platform where they do presentations. Whether they burn stuff on, I think they do things like some of the stuff is like symbolic of death, and like that they'll burn coffins and burn effigies of people and such. So I don't know if they're burning effigies of owls, but there is a great big owl, and it's often pictured with like torches around it and stuff like that. It has a spooky, sinister look to it.
right. I love I love how your account and your what you're seeing from ufology is sort of mystical as opposed to kind of ET and even interdimensional. And it seems to have like when you were talking about everybody having this life-changing synchronicity experience along with owls and UFOs, it's like, what does that mean? I mean, that's so deep. That's so different than just seeing a UFO from another planet or seeing some interdimensional thing. I mean, it's got almost a religious, not, I don't even want to say religious, but a mystical feel to it.
Yeah, I'm cautious to use the term religious, but it certainly has a mystical quality to it. And it's not everyone, but that's one of the questions I ask. And I got to be careful. I don't want to ask leading questions. So I ask, what was going on in your life leading up to the event, whether it's an owl, a synchronicity, or a UFO, what changed after. And then I ask, how would you rate your psychic abilities? And then I would ask, how would you rate your healing abilities? Do you have any healing abilities? And then I ask, have you ever seen a UFO? So sometimes so here's a story. This is one that's there's a woman in England. Her name is Maria Wheatley, and she does a little bit of crop circle research, but she also does a lot of work in sacred spaces, most particularly in the UK. Though she travels all over the world and goes to sacred spaces. And she was with a friend, and they were going to go on a walk in the evening in the English countryside. And there's a trail that goes through the forest. So they got out of their car, they had their car parked, they went to walk down the trail, and a white owl flew right in front of them. And they both had the same feeling, like, oh, we're not allowed on this trail. Like it bisected the trail. And they said, we can't cross that line. They both felt it. So they turned around, and there was a hilltop nearby. It's called Oliver's Castle. And I think some of the hill didn't have a castle on top, but that's what they call the hill there, Oliver's Castle. So they walked up to the top of the hill and watched the sun set from the summit. And as they were looking at the nighttime, the sun setting, they saw a ball of orange glowing light. And it was kind of floating towards them, and it got really big, and then it got huge, like a giant cigar-shaped ship, and then it got closer, and then it shrunk down, and then it poof disappeared, and it freaked them both out. So they ran down to get back in the car, and she said he was shaking so hard he could hardly get the key in the ignition to unlock the door. So they went to the pub, and he said,
As you do.
it's in England. Yeah, it's in England, in crop circle country. So they went to the pub afterwards, and he said that he could read everyone's mind at the pub. And it scared him. He did not like it, but he could read everyone's mind. And she said she had been doing tarot work. She was working as doing tarot readings. And she said after that event, her ability and her insights and her sort of psychic skills in conjunction with the tarot reading just like vaulted up exponentially. She said it eventually eased back down, but it never went back down to that old place. She felt she had gained a new, higher skill at doing tarot readings. So that's the kind of thing I'm really looking for in asking. So here's something that's strange that I've told this to on podcasts, and I've told other researchers, and they're saying, you shouldn't share that. You can't share that. I'm like, of course I can. I can share this. Is like I'm not that, like, I'm not like, it's not proprietary. So this guy, so I talk to people all the time about owls and their experiences, most associated with UFOs. And I have a clipboard when I'm working, right? So I'll talk to a lot of people on the phone. I just have a clipboard and I make some notes. I don't make much. I just type the phone number and time, the date. And so if they ever call back again, I can refer back to the sheet of paper. And then in the corner of the paper, I write Reiki. And I just wait. And somewhere in the conversation, they'll say, not everyone, but damn near everyone will say, oh, if I'm working as a Reiki healer, or I just got my level 3 Reiki certification. So, or if they're not doing Reiki proper, they're doing some form of energy healing that's very similar to Reiki healing. And it's like, I don't have a staff. I would love to go through all my files and crunch the numbers. And it's tough, right? Because you talk to someone and you don't write it down. And they said, oh, yeah, I had an owl experience, and I'm a Reiki healer, So this is anecdotal, but I would say that over half the people who contact me, at least half the people, let's say, that have an owl and UFO experience are also Reiki healers.
Wow.
Like that, like 50% of the general public is not a Reiki healer, but 50% of the people with owl and UFO experiences are doing Reiki healing or some modality very similar to Reiki.
That's fascinating. I have a question about the couple that were going down the path, the path through the forest, and that white owl blocked or flew by. Did they not go on the path and they went to the castle instead, or did they continue down the path?
No, they turned around. Went
the other way.
It was the same parking lot. It's my understanding it was the same parking lot.
Yeah.
That led to, so they just turned around and went
the other way. Wow, that's fascinating. How that stopped them, and then that happened. I mean.
Yeah. So here's another story. This is like, I love when I get these stories like that kind of mirror each other. Do you know who Bert Jansen is? He's a crop circle researcher. He's doing all kinds of esoteric research now. He's wonderful, engaging, super entertaining performer and great, funny, gregarious character. So he's Dutch, and he was spending his summers in the UK doing crop circle research. It's going back in the 90s, I think. And he, at the end of the summer, been a few summers in a row, he said, this is a question, what was happening leading up to the experience? He said, I'm done. I'm a handful of years in a row, coming back to crop circle country. Like, I've seen it. What am I going to know? There's no new information. I'm done. I'm quitting after this season. And he looks off, and there's this orange ball of light floating above the crops. And then it floats along, and he's standing all alone in this field. And at the edge of the field is a shed. And the ball of light kind of gets a little bigger and a little smaller, and it floats along, and it's floating across, and it goes behind the shed, and he's kind of watching it as it flies along. And when it gets to the shed, it should have come out the other side, but it didn't. And he's like, what happened? What? So he goes up to the shed and puts his ear against the door, and he hears this awful hissing, this hiss, like really creepy hissing. And he's like, ooh, it was getting dark. And he's like, I'm coming back tomorrow. So he came back the next day, and he walked around the back of the shed, and right at the level up higher in this shed, more like a little barn, there was a window with one pane of broken glass. And that was right at the level and he's like, could the orb have gone in the shed? Could the orb have gone in the shed, the glowing orb? So he goes to the front, and the door's locked, and he listens to the door, and there's this awful hissing noise. Hiss, hiss. God bless him, he breaks the lock and goes in. And then he goes in, and once he's in, there's a loft with a ladder, and the hissing noise is coming from the loft. So he climbs the ladder and peeks over the edge, and there's a family of white owls. And they're barn owls, and they do make you can listen to it. They make this kind of eerie, screechy, demonic kind of hiss noise. They don't hoot like bigger owls. And so he was like, what is it? So he's since had a lot of white owl experiences, and he's like, so all of a sudden they were essentially the same thing in his mind. The white owl was the same thing as the orange orb. So here we have, in the same area, very close, same area, Wiltshire County in southern England, Bert Jansen has an experience where an orange orb leads him to a white owl. Maria Wheatley has an experience where a white owl leads her to an orange orb.
I love it.
And Bert has had many other owl experiences since then. Yeah. So.
Wow.
Clearly, you're not freaked out by him at all, though. I mean, I guess you just get numb to it.
I'm pretty like, it's funny. Like I've been with people and seen owls, and they get all freaked out, and I'm like, it's just a bird. It's like, and I see a lot of owls where I'm like, there's nothing paranormal going on. It's just a pretty bird, and it's an honor to see them. They're pretty cool animals and stuff like that. So I guess I don't really get freaked out in the same way that I would have at one point.
Any other birds or just owls?
Oh, there's lots of bird stories. Sometimes the bird stories will have like a different flavor to them. Hawks, for instance, hawks fly high in the sky in the sun, right? They totally visible. They're high in the sky in the sun. They have vision that can see a long distance, so they can look down and see a mouse or a rabbit on the ground. Eagles and hawks. The lore of the owl is they fly in the forest at night. So the forest has a totally different, like the bright sky. Zeus lived on a mountaintop, and he had a companion eagle, and his dramas and his issues were all about like lust and ego and conquering, and just these kind of physical, manly embodiment of just like the human side of humans, basically. Jealousy and rage and anger. And the owl flies at night in the forest, and that very quickly, so the lore, that's, if you're going to have one consistent thread of the owl mythological lore, is that the owl flies at night. And so it's only been a few generations that we've had an electric light bulb. So it was not very long ago, my great-grandfather's age, before the advent of the light bulb, the forest meant something totally different than it does now, right? So the forest was a place of testing, was a place of darkness, was a place of fear, was a place of mystery. So the owl can fly into the darkness, complete darkness, what we would call complete darkness, with perfect freedom, and that became a metaphor for flying to that other realm, the land of the dead, the land of the gods, the land of our ancestors. And then the owl returns. And that's where I got and they come back with a message. So they're coming back with a message from the God, from the ancestors, from the other realm, a message from the dead. So that's the consistent thread. Now, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, had a little companion owl. So wisdom is associated with this night issue. It's a feminine issue. And the eagle and the hawk are like daylight issues, bright daylight in the sky.
I've been seeing a ton of bald eagles lately.
Where are you living?
Just outside of Calgary, Alberta.
Oh, right on. Okay, yeah. So,
But I don't like see them all the time or anything like that. You know, I see them once in a while, but lately in threes. So two
Oh,
groups is
wow. Do you just keep track of that? Do you keep a diary, like a dream diary or a diary of that kind of stuff?
no, but
Yeah.
I just kind of know. I definitely noticed it where I was like, huh,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of eagles. And then just yesterday, the day before, I was coming up the road in Chester, and I was like, huh, there's a bunch of eagles there again. Three of them running around, getting chased by or chasing ravens.
Yeah, so the ravens, yeah, the ravens and eagles, and so also ravens and owls are total enemies, and they harass each other big time.
So I was hoping that means there's a bunch of freedom on my way, somewhere in my path. There's a bunch.
I'm free. Yeah, owl is. I mean, excuse me, the eagle. Whether it's freedom, and I'm not sure necessarily it's freedom, but I would say it would be. Now I'm not good at. It would be a daylight sort of issue. It would be sort of an above the waterline sort of an issue, where the owl, I would say, is a below the waterline sort of issue, that it's trying to reflect back at you.
So
And I'm being very loose with that.
ego could be like winning the lottery.
Could be winning lottery, like pragmatic day to day stuff.
Yeah, that's better almost, in some ways.
Well, you have to deal with both, right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, but it's easier to deal with a bunch of lottery money.
Well, let's say knock wood. Hopefully, that does happen. But yeah, well, it might not be something that's simplistic, but hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, I guess it's usually good though. I mean, even if the owls are good, the eagle can't be bad. I mean, it's the America bird, right?
Oh, I mean, the eagle was. I mean, the eagle's in all kinds of English imagery too. It's not a bald eagle. They don't have bald eagles. I don't think in Europe. I think they're all like what we would call like a golden eagle. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an American. I mean, it's certainly an American symbol, but that doesn't mean that it's its only symbol. And then also, I mean, if you're what's your lineage as far as being Native American? Oh, you're from Canada, so you're not American at all. Yeah.
Yeah, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe.
And what's the lore there for
For
eagles?
owls? For
For
eagles?
eagles.
I don't know. I should look it up. Actually, it didn't occur to me to look into that. I know the owls, and I know like muskrats are good, and coyotes are generally lucky.
Yeah, and then so you can look at it two ways, right? So if you're in a landscape, someone goes to like I had some powerful coyote experiences down in southern Utah, which is like the Navajo, Zuni, Hopi kind of corner of the state there. And the coyote's got a very pronounced sort of trickster, playful energy there. It might be different somewhere else. And then the other way to look at it is my lineage is Scottish and Danish, which is kind of Northern European type mythologies. So it might be connected either to your lineage or it might be connected to the landscape.
Yeah. I was going to mention about the landscape, like you mentioned in the Southwest, how there's a lot of the native lore about the owls is that they're not good. And then you think about what's happening now at the Skinwalker Ranch and all the weird stuff that's going on. Like it almost feels like it could be geographically, depending on ley lines or whatever kind of portals shit is going on in places, compared to maybe that stuff isn't happening in Scandinavia, for example. They have a different experience with the owl because it's not some shape shifting thing from another dimension.
Yeah. George Knapp, who wrote one of the Skinwalker, the first and second Skinwalker book, the one Skinwalker's Stalking the Skinwalker. I can't remember what the first one was, and the other one is Skinwalkers in the Pentagon. But I spoke to him, and he said that when he went to Skinwalker Ranch, there were a couple Native American guys, and there were some scientists, and an owl flew by at night. And he said, wow, did the Native Americans were like, no, like this is not good. And it just didn't, the other people were completely unconcerned. So there was just this cultural divide in the symbolism of the owl. And I would sort of be somewhere in the middle. I'd say, oh, this is a sign. Like from my direct experience with talking with people, with working with people, I don't necessarily find the sign is bad. It certainly implies, here I'll tell a story. A woman got a hold of me during the writing of this is one of those stories when I was like, oh, like, well, I gotta get a I need the story to finish this chapter. This woman got a hold of me, and she was she asked me not to tell me. So she was living on the West Coast, and she would walk her dog, and she would walk out on a big long jetty when she would walk the dog, like a big long pier out into the water. And it was pouring down rain one day, and she took her dog and went out for a walk, and it was pouring down rain. She gets about halfway out the jetty. It's long, goes way out into the salt water, and she's like, "What am I doing? What am I doing out here? This it's horrid. I would never come out here and walk in this weather." So she turns around, and when she turns around and she's facing back the way she came, there's an owl standing in her path, and it's this great big owl. And she said her dog is super high strung, and the dog just sat there, totally calm, like it was confronting royalty. And she just looked at this owl for the longest time, and eventually it flew off, and she went back home. Now, in that chapter of her life, she was dealing with a lot of UFO contact issues. She was working with a therapist. She was part of a support group. She was trying to deal with this issue in her life. After seeing the big owl, she noticed a pain in her arm, and she went to see a doctor, and she had cancer. And she went through traditional chemotherapy, and it almost killed her. She said, I got a breath away from death, and I beat it, and I've been cancer free. I can't remember what it was now, 15 years and that's probably 8 years ago I've talked to her. So she's been, probably getting close to 25 years of being cancer free. And I said, do you think the owl was trying to heal you from cancer? What do you think it was? Because the owl showed up just before she was diagnosed. And she said, I think the owl was there to tell me that life was going to be challenging. I think the owl is a totem. It's not a light totem. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it often marks a challenge in someone's life. A challenge isn't necessarily bad. It can be hard work, but it's not necessarily bad. And then I asked her, well, okay, so that was leading up to what changed after the owl thing. She said, before that owl sighting, before the cancer, I was scared of my own shadow. After this, after all I've been through, I am scared of nothing. So that's the most poetic part of the story, that for me, that she came through this thing and is now, in essence, fearless.
Yeah. Wow. Another great story. Fascinating. So what do you think about do you have any thoughts on the latest kind of UAP disclosure stuff? Are you intertwined in all that? Do you get dragged in with all your
it's really
clear of that?
I'm totally staying clear of it. It's funny. My focus in my research is this elusive, mystical, that mood, that flavor, that's just tipping into dream logic, that's tipping into mythology, where real life is reflecting ancient myths. And again, I'm looking at, I couldn't be more myopic. I couldn't be looking through the microscope at a tinier piece of the big puzzle. I'm not standing back looking at the grand collective of the UFO mystery. I'm focused on this tiny, tiny little thing of UFOs and owls. And from that, I'm getting this kind of, I want to be really careful. It's not necessarily optimistic, but it's certainly not bad, the things that I'm finding or the stories that are emerging. I certainly have some that are scary, but scary doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's sort of the other part of the question is, I've thought that the phenomena is going to react to this accelerated disclosure, whatever's true or not. There's more people believing in all this stuff than ever. The phenomena will react in some way.
I'm getting a lot.
Have you seen an increase? Have you seen any kind of increase in your little thin slice of it at all? Any change? Any shift?
Oh, so many more stories are arriving. At the same time, I'm becoming, each year I'm a little more well known. It's a little easier to search me out. The books have been around long enough that they're kind of, people know about them. So if someone does have an owl experience, I got a letter this morning. Someone went out last night might not have been last night, within the last few days. And she went out to look at the stars, and she was just kind of like, wow, this is beautiful. And she said, like, I would love to make like, like connect with some sort of like cosmic family. And she's at that point, she saw a little dot of light that like made a sharp right angle turns in the sky. And right as that was happening, she heard an owl hooting. Same time. And she's like, wow, like it really. So she came in and she Googled UFOs, owls, and she found me and she sent me a letter. Like, I had a woman, she was riding her bike home from the gym. An owl crossed her path, and she looked up in the sky and saw like basically a metal flying saucer. She was on, so then she like right with her phone, like Googled UFO owls, found me, sent me a text. We were talking within like 3 minutes.
Wow.
Of her having that experience. She had no idea what to make of it. And since then, her life has kind of become unhinged with all kinds of UFO type experiences. Or let's say the type of experiences that people who have UFO contact will report. These powerful synchronicities, these kind of mystical experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, it's fascinating.
Before we start to wrap up, Mike, I mean, you're the synchronicity guy. You must have, like, we kind of used to rate them around here. We do still sometimes. I mean, yours are, if I remember, we did this last time and it was a 10. The one you brought up was a 10 for sure. Do you have any new ones that are kind of jaw droppers? I mean, these little synchronicity things, it's crazy because when we started out, they weren't that big, and your show might have been one of the only ones talking about it, and we kind of picked it up from there. And, there's a few shows talking about it, but not a lot. But now it's sort of ubiquitous, and it's, it seems to be almost the little thing that can get people to come over. It's like when this crazy coincidence that's just fucking too much and they just don't have time for the paranormal or any of the crazy stuff, but then something happens and they're just like, what the fuck just happened?
Wow, I got a lot of them. I got to think for a little bit because I just get a lot of them. So here's a story I don't think I've. This just happened. This was actually last summer, but wow, this is a tough one. Okay, so there's a park right across the street from me, and then behind the park, and this is the northwest, so there's like blackberries that are like 15-foot wall of blackberries, and then there's the baseball diamond, the outfield fence. So it's this little corridor. It's not quite, you could go like this and touch one hand to the fence and one hand to the blackberries, and you got to walk the entire length of behind the outfield fence to get to this trail that goes to a park. So I walk there all the time. It's right outside the door here. So I'm coming home and I see a little bird hopping in the grass, and I can tell something's wrong. And I go up, and the bird, this is actually kind of a gross, sad story, but it was a robin, a male robin, and it must have flown into the fence, and its head was essentially almost like his neck was broken, and so that it was jumping around. Its head was like bobbling upside down, like almost not connected, and it was jumping around. And I was like, oh no, this is awful. And I followed it around, and there's like some trash like in one little corner there. So I spoke aloud to this little robin, and I said, I can end your life if you want me to. And I, like, it was really sad. This thing was going to die. And then I said, I can, and I actually kind of managed to touch it, and it kind of got scared and it hopped off into the blackberry bushes. So there's no way I could do anything. So I had a rock, and then there was like a sharp little piece of a board, like a pallet, like this sharp little block of wood. And I was ready to end this poor little bird's life. And I have a cat. So I've ended up doing that to a lot of mice over the decades. Are you frozen? Can you see me?
Yep.
You are frozen, but we can still hear you.
Okay. So I just set the rock and the little piece of wood on right at the edge of the fence. And the owl had hopped off somewhere far away. Not far away, but 20 feet away. And then the next day, I go on this walk almost every day. I came back, and I was walking along, and on the the piece of wood and the rock, laying on top of the piece of wood and the rock was the dead robin.
Oh my God.
Damn, that's wild. You know, the day I can't remember. I think it was the day before. Might have been the day before, the day after I messed up my finger hunting. Um, didn't see Bigfoot, but oh, that was the last show. Anyway, I there's a bird, and I must have like I turned around to do something, maybe go to the bathroom, and I came back, and there's this little bird on the ground right next to my truck, and it must have like flown into the window or into the side or something like that. And I was holding the little bird. I thought he was gonna die for sure. I was like, it was the same thing. His head was kind of fucked up, but it was kind of seemed like he was bouncing back at the same time. And so I was like, and I had guns, so I could just shot the motherfucker. I was out getting ready to go hunt ducks. So I just set him on the little back of my truck there, and I was like, well, I'm gonna give you a few minutes, little dude, then I'm gonna shoot you, because if your neck's all fucked up and you can't fly, you're just gonna freeze to death tonight. So I'll just shoot you, and that'll be the end of it. And I got everything ready. He was still there. I sort of picked him up again, and I was like, well, I'll try and like just picking him up and throwing him and seeing if he flies away. And if he flies away, I'll leave him. So I picked him up, and he flew around a little wise, and he came back and landed like right on the little ridge of my door, where the window rolls down into. And then I went to touch him again to see if I could touch him, and then he flew off and never came back.
What was going on in your life leading up to this?
It might have been the day before I broke my finger. It might have been the day before, the day after. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I don't know. No, we were getting ready for an event. I'm getting ready to move. I was going duck hunting. I just shot some elk. I had a successful elk hunt. I mean, I had a great hunting season. So, yeah, I don't know. Everything was good, I think. I can't remember if it was the day before or the day after I broke my finger. I don't remember having a fucked up finger. It must have been the day before.
Wow.
That's interesting. Yeah. So
Maybe
how do you think that
motherfucker.
Trigger finger?
I think that bird?
No.
Oh, I see. Okay, I can see it there. Yeah. Your ring finger.
Doctor
Yeah.
says I'm not allowed to shoot anymore, though. She wasn't happy. I was shooting skeets all weekend. So I got to take 2 weeks off. Maybe one.
Oh, the doctor wasn't happy that you were doing that? Oh, jeez.
No, she says the vibrations are bad.
Oh, bad vibes. Can't have bad vibes.
Yeah.
So how do you think that bird ended up back on the board? I mean, isn't that crazy? Like,
oh, I don't know. I mean, that was like its implement of death. That was like I was going to kill him with that little piece of board, and smashed. Used the rock to kill him.
He thought you made him a little grave to die on.
It's a great.
But he couldn't. His couldn't see. His head was like barely connected.
I know we wanted. I just want to mention this one thing. I know we probably talked about it 8 years ago, because this is such an amazing part about the owls. But somebody mentioned in the chat, catastrophic New England. There, perhaps they're a species more commonly used for eyes and ears, agents like Mr. Smith observing key points in people's lives. And I mean, even in Dungeons and Dragons and all these other lore, like the owls have the wisdom, the big eyes and the ears to see and hear. Like they are the perfect vehicle if somebody was going to use that animal as a vehicle for observance.
Yeah.
Or and then somebody mentioned, are owls the watchers? That was M. Lansing.
Well, the watchers is a biblical term, and that can mean any number of things. So the owls certainly have that vibe. Wow. So here's what happens. So people say, like, I talk to people all the time. Hey, you're the owl guy. And it's like, oh, I saw an owl in my backyard, and it was really cool. Like, wow, but there's no story to it, right? They just saw an owl, and they say it had this presence, this magnificent, eerie presence. Like it's like seeing an owl is not like seeing a bunny rabbit, So they have that presence. But and I speculate in the first book that owls could be used, right? So if there's all kinds of stories of the UFO occupants putting implants into people, and what the purpose of those implants is kind of unknown. But if they can put them in people, they can put them in owls, right? So there's no better animal to be sort of, let's say, an organic drone
Yeah.
doing the bidding of, let's say, the UFO occupants, right? So they could just land on a tree. They've got magnificent hearing. It's 100 times better than our hearing. So if you're talking in the house and they're on the tree outside the window, they can hear everything you're saying. And they got night vision, so they can watch you, and they can fly in total silence, so they can follow you without you knowing. It's perfect. I don't know if it was a fun avenue of speculation. I don't really know what to think. It
Yeah.
doesn't correlate with the rest of my research cleanly. Like, I have no evidence that the owl is connected to the ETs. Here's what I can say. This is actually something that has changed and has gotten much stronger in the last few years. I used to say, initially my research was owls and UFOs. And then since then, I realized, and that's since collecting all the stories, it's also connected to owls are mushrooms or psychedelics, meditation. Lots of people meditating. They'll often meditate with their eyes closed, and they'll open their eyes and there'll be an owl staring in at them from the window. Or they'll be outside and they'll meditate and they'll open their eyes and an owl's on the branch staring at them. That's pretty common. Owls and death, where owls will show up around the time of the death. Owls and shamanic initiation. Shamans going through the initiation rites in their culture, whether it's in their tribe, will have like, it's well understood in the community of shamans that owls show up around the time of initiation. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's it. And so I'm saying that in owls and UFOs, so the UFO is connected to. I'm saying that the owl is connected to these highly charged human events. And it's not necessarily that the owl is connected to the UFO. The owl is connected to highly charged human events, of which UFO contact most assuredly is a highly charged human event. So it's not that the owls are only locked into UFOs. It's more that the owl is locked into the highly charged human event. So I'm much more. Let's say I'm. It's fascinating for me that it's these highly charged human events, all of which are kind of bordering on the mystical. Mushrooms, psychedelics, shamanic initiation, meditation, death, UFOs. I mean, those are all around the mystical thing. It's funny. I like near-death experience. People that have the near-death experience. Wow, that to me that should fit in. I've gotten no reports of owls connection to near-death experience, which is funny because doesn't it feel like it wants to be connected? Yeah. But I got no evidence of it in my files.
Wow.
Well, Mike, this has been fantastic. Let's not wait 8 years before doing it.
Yeah.
Where's the best place for people to get the book? Are you still on Twitter? Are you on any social media stuff like that?
I'm on Twitter. I hardly check it. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can find me at any of those places. Tough to connect with me there because I don't check the little feed that has the messages. The best way to get a hold of me is just through email. My email contact info is on my website. There's one main website. It's myclelland.com. If you type in Owls UFO, you're going to find me right away. You can find the books on Amazon. And let me tell you that. So the fiction book has been really well received. Really, the reviews on the fiction book kind of like are. I did not expect people to tap into that book as strongly as they are. So that's been really rewarding, and that along with my 3 other owl books are all on Amazon, and you can get to any of those if you go to either my blog, which is Hidden Experience, and you can find that by going to myclelland.com. That's just like a hub that'll take you to these other sites.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to the audiobook. I'm a real audiobook.
I'm looking forward to it too. It's been slow going, but I'm making my way through it. So
yeah, let us know when that's done, and we'll both pick it up on Audible for sure.
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
I sure will.
Yeah,
the whole world's going to know when that's coming out. So great.
Yeah.
And well, good on you for narrating it yourself.
Oh, I had to. Yeah,
Graham's
it's my
narrated
baby.
like 100 audiobooks, so he knows what it's like.
It's tough work. Yeah.
Oh, you've narrated them?
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, it is.
Not a lot of fiction. A few fiction, but not a lot. A lot of nonfiction. So.
Great.
Nonfiction's way easier because you
Yeah.
just sort of rattle it off.
Yeah.
Oh, and you have to act, you have to do women's voices, and you have to like, get choked up, and you have to like get mad and yell, and it's not, it's like you got to tap into your inner William Shatner, and when you do these things.
Your inner thespian. Well, you're doing a really good job at it. You're natural. So
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one last thing before we let it go. You did mention you loved the fiction. What's your favorite book?
What's my favorite book?
Favorite fiction, or what's your favorite fiction right now?
My favorite fiction book ever is The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler.
Interesting.
okay.
Yeah. So that's I say that. So the fiction book is in two halves, basically part one, part two. Part one is the inner dialogue, like all the mysteries getting set up. The mysteries getting set up, and then part two is a detective story, which is Raymond Chandler wrote these detective novels in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So part two of the book is like it's Raymond Chandler. Oh wow, did I tap into that heavy?
Wow. Well, it looks like you're still keeping on the work. Mike, this has been fantastic. I can't wait to check out that audiobook. We encourage people to check out the book, The Unseen, available on Amazon. Mike, have a great night, and let's not wait 8 years to do this again. Let's do it like
Thank you. Anytime.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.
And that was our chat with Mike Clelland. I mean, the dude, I remember now. As soon as I heard his voice, I remember all those hidden experience, synchronicity stories, and all that stuff back in the day.
Crazy how it comes back flooding in, eh?
Yeah, I think I must listen to close to almost every episode.
Yeah, good job, Mike. I'm looking at the Amazon, and all 5-star ratings. Fantastic.
Beauty.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, big thanks to Mike for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Even bigger thanks if you're one of the rare few who choose to support our great work over here, our magnum opus. Head over to grimerica.ca/support today. If you want to sign up for a monthly, make a one-time donation, spam Graham, tell him, who you like, who you don't, what kind of interviews we should do more of, who you want to have on the show. Let us know. Send in your synchronicities like you used to, and I'll tell you how terrible they are or how great they are. I mean, just make them good. Don't send me in the crappy ones. Some of them are pretty lame. But there are some great ones, too. I mean, we've given out 10s on this show. 8s, 9s. See what you can get. Spam Graham. Check out the other podcast, Grimerica Outlawed, for controversial stuff, the more conspiratorial, maybe even political. Adultbrain.ca for all the audiobooks we do. We're switching up this week to 3 new free books for next month. And anything else, Graham? Am I missing anything?
I think that's about it.
We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.